Good morning, everyone. I hope you guys have had an amazing weekend. I know I took the last week off to kind of let a few stories cook, let a few stories develop, but we're back. We're back, and I'm excited. We got a pretty beefy show for you guys this week. We're going to be talking about a few things. Starting with the trade war, and my goodness, this it's the gift that keeps on giving. The gift that keeps on giving. A lot to talk about there, where I think the U.S. trade deal with Korea is going to go, how I think we're going to end up. And then we're going to be moving on to a huge story coming out of Colombia. It is actually kind of insane what's going on there. Happy that the government was able to step in and get things sorted out. So stay tuned for that. Then we're going to be moving into, on a more domestic front, we're going to be moving into housing policy and what the DP's approach to housing reform is going to be. So that's going to be pretty interesting, pretty fun. And then kind of something that's been sitting, I think, under the radar a bit, which is pension reform. A lot of problems with the pension system as it stands now. And the DP is having to grapple with how do we maintain this system and improve it, and so that it's fully funded. So pretty interesting coming there. And then we're going to be ending with the Supreme Court. The DP had a session in the National Assembly where they called in a member from the Supreme Court, and it was a circus. It was definitely a circus. So we're going to get into all of that. But before that, I do have to ask, don't forget to like, subscribe. It really helps us grow this channel. It really allows me to do more. And it's very encouraging, very encouraging. So don't forget to like and subscribe, and let's get into the news. Okay, so the U.S. Korea trade deal. There's a lot to go. There's a lot to say with that, but I want to take a step back. Because we need to look at the totality of the situation that we're kind of in right now. We had a trade war officially kick off between the U.S. and China. And so that kind of changes the calculus on, I think, for the Koreans in this trade deal negotiation. And I'll get to why I think that's the case. But let's set the stage. So take a look at this. This is an article from Politico. It reads, the U.S. and China are about to launch the next front in their trade war. New port fees kicking in Tuesday could raise costs further on Chinese goods, ultimately reduce imports from Asia. Now, this is a huge story, and this is a big deal. And again, you're probably going, Thomas, why are you talking about China when this is a channel about Korea? I'll tell you why. Let me just read this bit for you first. The U.S.-China trade war has lurched from fragile truce to bare-knuckle brawl. It is about to intensify further when the two countries hike fees on each other. Commercial ships, I can't read. Hike fees on each other's commercial ships Tuesday, a move that on the U.S. side could end up raising consumer cost and driving down imports from Asia. Along with the new tussle over China's global chokehold on the supply of critical minerals, which prompted Donald Trump to threaten 100% tariffs and curb all new critical software in retaliation. China's Ministry of Transportation announced Friday that it's matching the Trump administration's plan to increase import fees on Chinese owned and operated ships. All right, so what does this mean in actuality? Essentially, the Trump administration said, hey, we're going to start putting port fees on Chinese ships going forward. Now, that in and of itself is bad, right? For the Chinese government, that in and of itself is bad. But the ludicrousy of doing this, while at the same time you are negotiating a trade deal with the Chinese, is levels beyond me of why you would make such a move. You're trying to negotiate a fragile deal to ensure that trade between your two countries can be maintained. And in your infinite wisdom, you decide to go and antagonize the Chinese and launch port fees, which caused them to go, okay, cool. We're not going to give you rare earth minerals anymore. Now, again, we're getting a little bit in the weeds. Thomas, why do we care about rare earth minerals? Well, because China controls 90% of the processing, refinement of those rare earth minerals. 90%. That staggering. Staggering. And the U.S. administration knew about this, right? It's no secret that they control 90% of the refinement of rare earth minerals. So, what does that have to do with Korea? Why am I bringing that up in this context? The Korean government is also watching this trade negotiation happen simultaneously as they are negotiating their own trade deal. Think about that. They're watching the Chinese and how they're being treated in their trade deal, and they're looking at how they're being treated in their own trade deal. So let's break this down a little bit further. What do I mean by that? I mean that the Korean negotiators are seeing a trade deal fall apart, that the framework of a deal was negotiated, and then that deal fall apart, just like their deal. The framework of their deal, which they reached back, what was it, July, August? I'm blanking on exactly when the exact trade deal locked in. They had agreed on a framework, and then on a dime, actually we want all the money in cash. That is what we've determined that we're going to do. We want all the money in cash. That you cannot, in good faith, you cannot do trade negotiations that way. Any negotiations that way. When you're striking up a deal with someone and midway through you want to swap up on the deal, most people aren't going to sit comfortably with that. So let's identify some of the key players in this, because I think it's important. I don't think we've covered it here on the channel. Who are the key players in these trade negotiations? On the U.S. side, Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick, Treasury Secretary and Commerce Secretary, respectively. These are the two guys who are in talks with the Korean negotiators, and I don't want to butcher their name, so Ko Yeon-chul, Kim Young-bum, and Kim Jung-kwon. The finance minister, the presidential chief of staff, and the industrial minister, respectively. They are all taking place in these key negotiations. They are the negotiating team that is going off to Washington to meet with Howard Lutnick and Scott Bessent. They are the ones who are coming back and saying, hey, this is what our boss said that we're allowed to take in terms of a deal. Take it or leave it. We can't sway him on this. This is where he is. This is what he wants. But at the same time, the American negotiators are doing the exact same thing. Hey, Trump wants this. Take it or leave it. This means fundamentally we are at an impasse, because if both presidents are saying, I'm not going to do this, I'm not going to give you $350 billion in cash, and Trump is saying, yeah, no, the only way we're doing this deal is $350 billion in cash. That's what we call an impasse. So I want to break this down a little bit more. There were these articles going around for a while saying, the U.S. Korea trade deal is within arm's reach. They're wrapping it up. They're putting the bow on. And then Howard Lutnick came out and said, hey, we're going to have this deal wrapped up in a few days. I was like, oh, that's interesting. That's contrary to everything that I was hearing or seeing. So I was interested. So it was very interesting because you could see that on all of the American outlets, all of the Western outlets, they're reporting, yeah, this deal is nearly done. This deal is nearly wrapped up. But I decided to go search with the Korean outlets and look at what they were saying, what they were highlighting. So let's take a look at this. This is from the Korea Times. Industry Minister Lutnick meets. I can't read today. Lutnick meets to narrow gaps over Korea's $300 billion investment plan. So it goes on to recap a lot of the things, but I think this is some of the stuff that I found important. This is some of the stuff here that I found important. The presidential chief of staff said, we had sufficient talks for 2 hours. We had sufficient talks for 2 hours. And listen to what he doesn't comment on, because I think that is what is more important. What is not being said? What are we not hearing from these guys? What is not being said out loud? What aren't they confirming? Right? All right. So we had sufficient talks for 2 hours. I hate to say it. If I think a negotiation is going well, oh, I got done with my interview and I impressed my boss and I said, I think we had sufficient talks. That's just a weird way to phrase it. Unless when they make these comments, they know what they're doing. They're aware of what the press is going to be saying. They're aware of how people are going to break these down or break these conversations down. So I find it interesting that he said that. But continuing, he refused to comment when asked if there was any progress in trade negotiations. Any progress? Was there any progress? I'm not going to comment on that. Was there any progress? I'm not going to comment on that. It remains unknown whether the two sides will resume talks on Friday. Today, right now, as we're filming this, it is Friday Korea time, but they are in the U.S., so it's still Thursday. So yeah, I don't know. It's just baffling to me, because they're claiming, oh yeah, we think we're gonna wrap this up soon. The president's chief of staff said you guys had sufficient talks and wouldn't even confirm if they were making any progress. That doesn't sound like they're wrapping up this trade negotiations any soon. So it continues. I want to highlight this. It continues. Taking stock of how the negotiations have been so far, we are at a juncture when the two countries are engaging in negotiations in the most earnest and constructive atmosphere, Kim said. Earnest and constructive. So, hey, we're being as honest as we can be. We really need you to do this. But it continues. We will do our utmost to ensure the new negotiations will be wrapped up well in a direction that serves Korea's national interest. Not that we're going to... Let's be specific, too, about this. He's not saying we're going to wrap up this deal and make sure it gets over the finish line. He's saying will be wrapped up in a direction that will serve Korea's interests. To me, the way I break that down is doesn't really sound like he's saying that they're committed, absolutely committed to this deal. It sounds like to me that they are keeping the door open so that if they want to walk away from this deal, they will and they can. That, hey, yeah, well, we're negotiating. We're trying to send, American or our negotiators to the U.S. But we got what we got. It continues. So they were asked to respond to Secretary Bessett's remarks of saying, "Hey, we're going to get this wrapped up in the next 10 days." And his response was, "Doesn't the U.S. appear to be likely to make many concessions then?" I think they might have been mistranslated, or this kind of seems funky in its translation. I think what he was trying to say there was, well, doesn't the U.S. seem like it's going to make many concessions? Essentially alluding to, yeah, we're going to have to make some concessions then. They're going to have to make some concessions then, because this is our red line. We're not going to pass that red line. This seems like a hardball play, that they are at a point where this is the line. You guys either cave or you don't. I don't know, guys. I don't know. When the U.S. expects a result within 10 days, that's apparently represents its interim assessment of negotiations with us. And I read it as a sign that is not bad, he said. We hope that the U.S. will reflect more of our positions as much as it can. We hope that the U.S. will reflect more of our positions as much as it can. Come on, guys. That does not read hopeful for me. I don't know what every other Western news agency is reading, but This is from the Korea Times. This is from the Korean Times. This is the chief of staff, basically the most powerful person in the Blue House, aside from the president himself, the chief of staff saying, "Hey, hope the U.S. can negotiate. I hope the U.S. can reflect on their positions because we're not moving. We're not moving." This is what I'm interpreting from his statements. This is what I'm interpreting from his statements. So, why do I think they're leaning in that direction? Why do I think there's a possibility that they may pull out of this deal? Well, kind of the energy is there. Last week, I think it was Monday of last week, we saw uh, we saw a article come out or a few articles come out talking about how the Rebuilding Korea Party was essentially saying, "Hey, we we need to be done with this trade deal. We need to be done with this trade deal." Now, this is a member of the National Assembly, him and his party. For those who don't know, Korea is a multi-party system. There aren't really a lot of parties, but it is a multi-party system. And this is, I believe, the third largest party in the National Assembly. Now, let me not overstate the case. There's 12 members to this party. There's 12 members, but that that can sway a lot. And I think what that really does is speak on the tone of kind of where everyone is feeling, where the national conversation is. That the fact that not only are they out there, but they're actually protesting outside the U.S. Embassy, that his party was protesting outside the U.S. Embassy. Let's take a look at this. Take a look at this. Rebuilding Korea Party chairman proposes National Assembly resolution against U.S. tariffs. Chokuk urges cross-party unity, citing 85% public opposition to U.S. tariffs demands. I was not able to find where he got that number from. I was not able to find that. But still, the case being said that, and this is from the Chosun Daily, and to back up their claims, this is them outside the National Assembly, or excuse me, this is them outside the U.S. Embassy protesting. This is them outside the U.S. Embassy protesting. It is, it is, it is something else. It is something else. So, public opinion, the public pressure campaign, public sentiment, moving away from this trade deal, moving away from how the U.S. has been treating, because again, we still have to remember everything happens in the context of the way the U.S. was treating Korea, the way that people are feeling. I don't want to say misled. They're feeling abused by the U.S. Why do you need $350 billion in cash? And why is this such a sticking point in the negotiations? So this is speculation time. This is speculation time. And so I have nothing to corroborate what I'm saying. But this is where I think the administration is at. The APEC summit is coming up at the end of the month. And I believe that they are continuing negotiations, willing to listen to the American side and willing to push for what they want, which is loan guarantees, currency swaps, things of that nature. That is what they want. That is what they can afford, right? And I think they're willing to run the clock out until the APEC summit, where Lee Jae-myung, who is not directly negotiated anyway. I know there is the picture of Lee Jae-myung meeting up with Trump in the Oval. But at that time, they're not negotiating the deal. They're kind of rubber stamping, not even rubber stamping, but kind of taking a victory lap for the deal being done. But there's still a bunch of things that needed to be buttoned up, and they themselves weren't actually negotiating the deal. That is what their aides do on their behalf. So the photo op was, well, literally just that, a photo op and a place for them to meet up and get to know one another. But I do think the Apex Summit is where I think the Korean, I don't want to say make their final stand, but I think their last push for this deal, where Lee Jae-myung is able to meet face to face with Donald Trump, get a one on one with him, and really see if the deal is something they even want to continue. And the reason why I say the APEC Summit is probably the best place for that is there are going to be many world leaders there from all over Asia. And what makes it even more interesting is Xi Jinping is going to be here in not in Seoul, in Gwangju, for the APEC Summit, which is going to be very interesting because if I can't strike a deal with the U.S., there could be, a reality where they either strike up a trade deal with China, they strike up a deal with any of their other Asian partners. There is a lot of outreach that can happen at this summit. And so I think this is where, again, I just want to say this for that to not be used against me, but this is my speculation. And what do I kind of have to go off of? Well, there's an exclusive report from Yonhap News. Oh, I probably butchered that. Yonhap News, where, take a look at this. Exclusive. All possibilities are open. We'll read further. With follow-up talks on the South Korea-U.S. tariff negotiations at a standstill, the possibility of a 25% tariff reduction is reportedly being considered within the government as one of the several options. In a phone call with Yonhap News TV today, a senior government official stated, "While it's impossible to predict, we are keeping all possibilities open regarding the possibility of a 25% tariff and reduction in lieu of signing an agreement amid the U.S. unilateral demands and pressure to reach an agreement. If a final agreement cannot be reached, it appears the government is not completely ruling out the option of accepting a 25% reciprocal tariff during President Donald Trump's term, rather than signing an unreasonable agreement that runs counter to the national interest." There it is. Right there. If we can't get a deal that is reasonable and that does not take advantage of us, then we're walking away. And I think, and I want to be clear, that article is from the 14th. That article is from the 14th of last month. Not this month, last month. That article is a month old. Which means, and I want to be clear about this, the article is a month old and the position has gotten even worse. The Trump administration is more dug in. Well, if we're a month out and nothing's changed, I don't see the administration, especially since this takes a lot of energy. This is a lot of energy and a lot of time and a lot of focus to hash out a trade deal like this. You're taking, the chief of staff of the president of South Korea is a busy man, and having to fly back and forth to Washington for what are we doing? Like 2 months now? Almost 3 months? It's not an easy thing to do. And so eating the 25% tariffs for a couple of years might just be better than signing on to a terrible tariff deal that you will have to renegotiate. So I don't know where things go from here. You guys already know what my speculation is. But I'm going to be continuing to keep my eye on this because I don't really know where we go from here. This isn't a situation I think the Koreans were expecting to find themselves in, and I don't think this is a situation they want to be in. But I think what they've done is they said, okay, cool, we're here and we're not going to capitulate. and we are going to negotiate the best deal possible for ourselves. And if you want $350 billion in cash, sorry, we're not doing it. We're walking away. And there are a lot more countries that haven't signed deals than have. I mean, you also have to consider from their perspective, hey, we don't even know if any of this stuff is like legal, considering you're tariffing the world and your tariffs are being brought on in courts in the US and you're going up to different courts. And it might just be better. From my position, from where I'm sitting looking at this situation, you have a trade partner you can't trust. You have a trade partner who's trying to change the framework of a deal, not just with you, but also with other countries. I think this looks like they walk away. Don't quote me on that. If I'm wrong, you guys, hey, look, you guys get in that comments and tell me, hey, you were wrong. But for me, for right now, from what I'm seeing and everything that they're putting out there, does not look like they are going to be signing off on this deal. We can hope. We can hope. All right, let's get to the next story. Thanks so much for watching. If you liked that video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe. And if you have a comment, go ahead and leave it down there in the comments. Thank you. See you in the next one.